Well, good morning, everyone. I appreciate you all joining us today for our webinar on Ascent Data Manager. Really excited to talk about this topic today. We over here at Ascent have been working on for quite some time, basically redoing some of the different software packages that we have related to GIS, and we're excited to talk about one of those here today. I wanted to, if anybody has any questions, I just wanted to do a quick housekeeping. If you have any questions on the right side, there's a little panel there. You can put in your questions, and then we'll save those into the very end, and then we'll answer all of those questions at that time. But with that being said, I want to introduce our team that we have here today. So I am the esteemed and the most prominent Magdalena and Phil joining me today. So Magdalena, thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Magdalena brings over 17 years of work experience in GIS, natural resource and asset management. She's experienced in data management, geodatabase building, relational databases, spatial analysis, spatial statistics, and cartographic presentations. It's a lot of stuff. Working on all kinds of different projects in oil and gas and hydrogeological studies and a bunch of words I can't even say. A lot of stuff you've done, Magdalena. Here at Ascent, she's responsible for the stewardship of spatial data, administering the centralized data storage, and supporting web-enabled mapping applications for asset management. Magdalena holds a BA in environmental studies with a concentration in spatial analysis from Mount Holyoke. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
College, and also a master's in GIS from the University of Denver. So Magdalena, thank you for joining us.
Of course.
I also am joined by Phil Lilligard, and Phil has 4 years here at Ascent. He manages the data and data technicians who process, analyze, and deliver this geospatial data. And Phil holds from George Mason a geography degree. So welcome to the webinar today, Phil.
Thank you.
Excited to have you guys. And my name is Keith Hill, and I'm the Director of Business Development here. And the way that we'll go through this today, what we'll do is focus just about a minute here to introduce Ascent and who we are, and then we'll dive into understanding a little bit more about what type of environments people are using today in order to be able to manage large projects, asset management type of inventory. And then we'll dive into more about the Ascent Data Manager, actually going through a live demonstration. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into a quick history on Ascent. Ascent, if you're familiar with Ascent Geomatics, we have been in the Colorado Basin here since 2006, but you may be familiar with us from our previous name, Petroleum Field Services. Same company, everything is the same. We just made a change in our name back in 2017. We've got a little over 80 employees now, with our headquarters based out of Denver, and we also have operations and an office down in Midland, Texas. Our main source of market that we work with, or the main market we work with, is oil and gas, both upstream and midstream, but we also work in other areas like civil infrastructure, transportation, and a few others. We've done quite a bit of work here in the DJ, and it's been working with all of you folks on the call here, a lot of the operators, that we were able to really build out a unique system that is very helpful, and we're going to dive in and talk about a little bit of that here shortly. So before we dive into Ascent Data Manager, I think it's probably important for us to just quickly do a recap on what we see a majority of our clients are using today from a standpoint of what tools are currently in use. And so to do that, I guess I'll just kind of open it up. Phil, maybe you could help out here. When you are working with some of the operators, what are some of the different tools prior to using Ascent Data Manager that you're seeing that they use?
Yeah, so when they're tracking their projects, usually they'll use some form of spreadsheet like Excel. If they are preliminary planning, they usually use Google Earth just to get a lay of the land. And then, of course, they have PDF printouts that they keep locally and send through emails. So a lot of this involves duplication of these PDFs and KMZs from Google Earth that people are sending around. And then, of course, there's the geodatabases that we actually, the data is stored in and then it's sent to people. So there's a lot of different tools and a lot of different data being sent around to everyone.
And so because there's so many different tools that are being used, I mean, from Excel spreadsheets to Google Earth to PDFs, and you mentioned the duplication, but do you find that that creates some inefficiencies in a way just because there's so many different sources of information that people are looking at?
Exactly, yeah. If you don't click on the right email or you look at an old Excel document, you're going to have old information, and that could cause a whole lot of problems.
Okay. And so, Magdalena, question for you. Obviously, there's folks on the call right now that have they've invested into large GIS databases. So do you also work and talk with clients that currently have some sort of Esri system or something in place from a GIS perspective?
Yes, that's pretty typical for a lot of our larger clients. They do have their own GIS departments, very good specialized folks, but oftentimes this GIS department lives a little bit in its own world, and it's not as accessible to people in other groups or on a quick on-demand meetings. And so even though those GIS databases are there, they don't have a way to access it, barring, going through some of their specialized GIS analysts or GIS folks. So they have to go request some information and wait for it to come back in some sort of format that's going to probably run back to what Phil was just talking about, get a PDF format map or an Excel spreadsheet. So the GIS databases are great, but oftentimes they're not very accessible.
Okay, and it sounds like they're in most of the cases we see, even with large investments in GIS databases, obviously they serve a purpose, they're still using a lot of these other tools.
Yes, because the people that are not savvy with GIS technology or they don't have the correct license, even though they have the technology, it's not accessible to everyone in the company.
Okay, great. And so obviously by using a certain set of tools, inherently there are certain processes and certain challenges that may come along with that. And so, when we take a look at what some of those look like, what are some of the different processes that you see that these tools kind of dictate that they have to use and workflows? Magdalena, maybe you could weigh in on that.
Yeah, so what we see in a lot of workflow, people are trying to make decisions using a variety of tools. So they would go to public websites like Colorado Oil and Gas Commission website or Department of Water Resources and try to extract public information. Then they try to compare it to what they have internally, maybe in their geology group or their asset management group. But a lot of times they go to different, data sources, and then they get piecemeal information from their various contractors, from their surveyors, from their environmental folks, from their regulatory department. So they try to look at various pieces of information, but it's hard to get the full picture.
Okay. And so the challenges that they're dealing with are, working in these silos, and then ultimately what you just said, it's hard to have that full picture of everything that's going on. And then obviously everybody in the whole company having to go to a GIS expert or team to be able to try and get some of that information that they're looking for. Are those kind of the main challenges that you see?
Yeah, that is very common. The clients would acquire some really good piece of information, but they don't have the right tools. They might not be able to open them in a software. They might not be able to bring it and in the same platform as if they're looking at an Excel spreadsheet and they get a PDF map and maybe they have some electronic data. They really have to send a request maybe to their department, wait for them to process it, and when they get it back, they're like, well, this is actually not really what I look for. They have to go back, send that request, and maybe it's not a very efficient way to share that information.
Okay, and that's obviously assuming that there is GIS personnel within the company, right? And obviously some of the clients we work with that there isn't, maybe it's a smaller operator, a newer operator, maybe they don't have those GIS shops in-house. So obviously we're talking about where they even have those GIS personnel. Mm-hmm. Great. So, okay, we've talked about some of the tools. We've talked about some of the processes and the challenges that we see with our clients. So, let's now kind of introduce the idea of Ascent Data Manager. So with that, maybe Phil, maybe you could just kind of bring us up to speed. What is Ascent Data Manager?
Yeah, so Ascent Data Manager is just a web-based map. So you can type in your www.url and it'll take you to it. You can use any browser you need. Internet Explorer, Chrome, etc. And then it's a user-friendly, non-technical tool, so anyone can use it. All it requires is a secure login and no GIS experience. So it's a central location where you can view all of your data, all your assets, all public resources that we provide. You can visualize your project progress and any sort of real-time data that you need to see. We also provide UAV imagery that gets overlaid on top of our the NAPE imagery that's provided by the public. And there's a whole lot of customizable widgets that you can use.
Okay. So this is, if I just kind of sum it up, so it's an easy to use web-based platform. Anybody from anywhere, assuming they have a username and password, can access this. And is that one of the big wins with Ascent Data Manager, is being able to have it be easily accessible and just have it be on your phone and things like that?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
You can be on site with your phone out or your tablet out and view that data.
That's huge. Yeah, obviously that's a little bit of a challenge if you have a large GIS kind of system to be able to have like a landman on the ground actually looking at that data. So Magdalena, when you've worked with a lot of our clients, both large and small, so what are the different types of projects that you've seen Ascent Data Manager start to help with, or what would it be good to help with?
I think there's really sky's the limit on this one. I think the Ascent Data Manager is well suited and very nimble so that you can serve really small clients, really small project, maybe one or two locations, to some really large scale projects, maybe even across entire basins. So we see a lot of this for just keeping track of the assets, seeing what we have on the ground, what has been surveyed, maybe proposed and planned locations. We see this a lot of times for multi-phase projects. So see if we have something on the ground, go from the preliminary planning phase, go through the construction, and then even go all the way through reclamation. So it's great for keeping track of what assets the client has, whether existing or is planning to put down, see all the context that's, the location of your project, and also visualize the progress of both the survey crews, the project management, permitting. It's just a really great tool to kind of see everything at the same time.
Okay, that makes sense. So ultimately, large-scale projects are perfect for Ascent Data Manager, right? You've got, so this could be things like managing flow lines, or maybe high-level facility as-built type of a program that you'd want to have, but something where it's good for progress and project management, as well as just being able to see exactly what's happening at any given time, and really kind of putting everybody on the same page. Does that kind of summarize what you were saying there?
Yes, I think you hit the nail on the head. It is really that for those large-scale projects, it's great to see all those resources, all those pieces of information come together.
Okay. All right. So Magdalena, I'll stay with you for a minute here. So who can use Ascent Data Manager? I mean, are these only small, newer type of operators? Are these only large operators? Is it all the above? Who is it? What types of companies have you seen and worked with that are using Ascent Data Manager?
I've really seen all sorts of companies, whether it's some little startup that has just a couple of folks that might not have resources to invest into their own GIS department, to really large-scale operators that have multiple offices all across the country, maybe even internationally, and they want to still be able to have that access on a project or a program basis. So it's great for people that don't have the technical expertise, and it's also great for people that really want to dive into the depth of the data and start overlaying these individual pieces of information for some great context analysis.
Okay, so for newer, smaller upstream operators, this essentially can act as their GIS system if they don't have the personnel, they don't want to invest in a huge, massive system. This can act as the GIS system for them.
Yes, it not only acts as a GIS analysis tool, but also as their centralized storage location. So all the pieces of information, data they already have, data that we might create for them or survey for them, and also the relevant pieces of information from public sources can live all in one spot. So it's both the tool and the repository for a lot of their data.
And then for the large operators that are out there, obviously we already talked about this. They already have existing GIS in place. So how does it complement what they have in place already?
Yeah, so we're not trying to replace or duplicate their efforts. We're really leveraging what they already have organized in the systems and tools they develop internally, but we can bring it in context with the data that we're producing, or again, bringing it together in context with a lot of the other public sources that they might not have integrated in their own systems. So I think it's really great for, again, technical and non-technical users in each company.
Well, and you can see, obviously, to that point, a list of different departments there. So that's kind of a good segue. There is a ton of different departments there, and that's probably not even the full exhaustive list of departments that could be using Ascent Data Manager. So, you've got groups like planning on here, facilities, project management, the land team. So, and even executive management, right? So bringing all of these teams together on one common platform. Obviously, you can't do that unless it's extremely easy to use, which it sounds like it is, and we're going to see in a moment here. So is that really kind of the main benefit here with the departments here, is that it kind of brings all of these, what would normally be siloed different departments together onto one easy-to-use platform where they can all be looking at a common set of data?
Absolutely. I think this is a great tool to bridge those those communication challenges between different departments. I think it's an excellent tool for any kind of executive large-scale meetings, or even if we just want to look at side-by-side analysis between, collaboration between different departments or different groups or stakeholders.
Great. And so we kind of jumped the gun here, but that's okay, because I think this is really the most important part, because ultimately everybody that's on this call is sitting here saying, well, that's all great, but what does that mean? So what? And so, when we look at the different types of problems, we've already talked about some of these, but maybe you could just really quickly recap, again, these kind of major problems that we see, and then ultimately, what are the business outcomes? So once we solve those problems, what does that ultimately help our clients to be able to do?
So exactly as we already mentioned before, I think the greatest advantage is to bring everyone on the same page. Everyone has the full picture. It's visible for all the different teams, and it also provides the ability to see the survey data as it's being collected. It's not necessarily real time, but near real time. So as the project is being surveyed, as more data is being collected, it is immediately available through this visual. Don't have to wait for any kind of data exchange. Huge benefit is also using our up-to-date imagery, whether that's from aerial survey or from drone survey. That always provides the best starting point for any project planning. And then again, that project progress reporting is everyone can see exactly where each of these individual sites or individual projects are, what's the next step, what maybe needs to move forward. And having all that context, having all those pieces together in a spatial context really minimizes the number of field revisits. So if you come with one plan and then the next piece of information, maybe the survey comes back, maybe you get your environmental analysis, you need to adjust your original preliminary plan. If you have all that information in one spot, you can do it without having to always go to the field, come back, wait for the data to process, and then do it maybe again.
Okay. And so, one of the bullets on here is minimizing the number of field visits. So obviously, when plans change, and they do always, right? Obviously, as a survey company, we're familiar with getting sent back out into the field, which obviously nobody wants that, because, that can increase safety incidents occurring, unfortunately, every time people are back out in the field. And obviously, it delays the project. And ultimately, it's going to have a cost implication as a result. But, really what's important, obviously, because of what we see here in Colorado, is this race for permits, right? And so anything that slows down that process, any extra visit back out in the field slows it down by just that extra day or two or more. And obviously, that can make an impact between one operator and another being able to get that permit, right? So I think that's a good point. one last thing on that problem solving, you have external and internal teams. So I think that's one thing that maybe we haven't necessarily talked about. We've been talking about breaking down these silos and having everybody involved within the organization. So having your land team be in the same communication with your regulatory team or your facilities group or construction or right of way and all those folks, right? But I think then it's an important point to make that there's also external teams like us. We're the survey company, and we are external to the operator. So, but you can see that data. Maybe environmental would be another example, right? Being able to have that data. So maybe you could just talk just for a quick second about, that piece of it too, which isn't just looking at the internal teams collaborating, but bringing in those outside teams collaborating as well.
Yes, I think it's a great point. The external parties oftentimes don't have the full picture, or maybe talk only with one or two departments. When they utilize the Ascent Data Manager, they really get the full context, even though maybe they're only talking one or two contacts within the company. So it's great for our field crews when they go to the field and maybe they get a phone call that scope has changed or they need to quickly reposition themselves. They can pull up this tool and have the full information. Even though they prepped for one location, they might go quickly to another location because all that information will be at their fingertips using the Ascent Data Manager. The other thing that we haven't talked about, but just when you mention it, is this is also a great tool for outside, let's say, inspection teams. You can, instead of having to produce all these reports and oftentimes when there's inspections from some agencies, you would have to spend a lot of time gathering data and formatting it. This is also a great way to just show to, let's say, inspector or regulatory agencies, like, see, this is what all our assets are, this is where they are. Obviously, there's a little bit of tweaking involved there, so only relevant information makes it out there, but that's another great use for external team.
Okay, great. And I know obviously we're going to see in just a moment here about the detailed asset management inventory component of this, which is very important, a huge business outcome. But we also talked about faster permits. So just to clarify for everybody on here, this guarantees faster permits. Is that what you said, Magdalena?
I think the ease of a tool really makes every piece in the workflow faster and smoother. So yes, you could say that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense, right? There's never a perfect silver bullet out there that's just going to make it better. But there are incremental things and tools that can be put in place to help bring everybody on the same page. And I think conceptually that makes sense. If everyone's looking at the same data, you don't have to go back out in the field or that's minimized quite a bit. You're looking at up-to-date aerial imagery, so you know exactly what's on the ground. Everybody sees exactly what's on the ground. I think that's huge. And obviously getting the data in a quick and efficient fashion is big. And ultimately, I think everybody on the call would understand that could help, certainly, to get faster permits. So Phil, I'm going to bounce it over to you now. We're getting ready to get into the live demonstration here. Maybe you could just tell us real quickly, how does Ascent Data Manager actually work?
So it's a JavaScript web platform. It's just on your web browser. You can use it on any web browser, like I said. There's no need to install anything. You just load it up. It has secure access for tiered level users. So if you need certain access, we can grant that to you, and then someone below you might not have that access. So it's very secure, simple login and username. Again, it works on your phone, so you could be on site using it anywhere. And it has a really just user-friendly interface. So I'll go over that in just a minute.
Okay, great. So we're not talking about downloading software to a computer and having to get all these random updates and things like that. You go to a website, you type in your username and password, and you're looking at data. Is that it? And that could be on a phone, it could be on a computer, it could be on a tablet. Basically, it's that easy. Is that right?
It's that easy.
Okay, cool. All right, well, what are we going to be taking a look at, Phil? If you just kind of give a quick high level here, what is your demo going to be covering?
So I'm going to quickly show kind of the general layout, the UI, some navigation tools. I'll go over the widgets that we have, some of the layers and the data you can see, and then we'll go into some of the possible workflows that we can use this for.
Well, I'm excited. Let's take a look at what we got.
All right, thanks, Keith. So I've already gone ahead and logged into the site. Again, that's just a username and password. When you open up the site, you'll see a general UI here. So you have your map in the middle. On the left top here, you have your search bar. You're able to search for client data, any assets that you may have, as well as public data such as parcels or water wells. The zoom in and out button is on the left, along with the home button and a location if you want to find where you're at. On the left side here is the layer list, as well as 3 buttons we have here are the bookmarks if you want to find a certain project that you saved, base maps, and a swipe tool, which we'll talk about in a minute, that you can swipe any of your layers. So inside the layers, you'll have your client assets, which we can expand to see some of the symbology as well as turn them on and off. We've also got cultural features, PLSS, and public data such as water wells, GeoGCC wells, etc. So if I go ahead and zoom in on a project here, I can then turn on some of these layers. So if you want to see field data, we provide that as an up-to-date view of where we're at with the project. We also provide drone imagery, which I can show over here. And one of the great assets of the swipe tool is allowing you to see the difference between the public imagery versus our imagery. So you can see public imagery is a little out of date. It's also not as crystal clear. If I zoom in closer, you'll see the difference there. From this imagery, we extract all of our cultural features. So you can see here under the cultural features, here's all the different features we extract, and you can see them on the map here. And from those, what we do is in your client assets, we'll apply regulatory buffers, which will allow you to see the distances you need to be from those features. We also have under field data, topographic contours, which we extract from that tin surface as well. So you'll be able to quickly see exactly a great place to place your pad. Along with that, you can use the public data. If I open up the hydrology layers here, you'll be able to see any creeks, rivers, FEMA floodplains that you need to look out for. If I go ahead and turn on the land parcels, you'll be able to see any landowners around the area. And if I go ahead and click on one of those, I can take a link right to the county record. Same thing with the GeoGCC data. If I turn that on, it'll show me all of the GeoGCC wells within the area. And I can go ahead and click on one. And again, have that link to the scout card, which will show me more information about that well. The last thing I want to show you under hydrology is the water wells. And again, we have a link to those water wells. What I'm going to do now is show you some of the tools we can use with these layers. So if I go ahead and want to measure between a well and your pad, you can always use the measure tool here. you'll get that measurement. You can also use the draw tool to plan out a pad. If you want to put a pad over here, you can draw that pad and see it visually before you've added it to the database. And you can also get measurements for area within that polygon. And then you can go ahead and print out that location map when you've, drawn up your pad. In this menu here, we have some other tools that I want to show you. So if I go ahead and turn back on the public data, I'll get rid of some of this extra stuff. One of the key things is that people want to know how close they are to water wells. So if I have these water wells turned on here, I can then buffer my facility a certain distance and see how many water wells are within that distance. So if I want to go ahead and buffer facilities, I want to buffer it 1 mile, I can select my facility here. If I zoom out, you can see that 1 mile buffer. And then when I say apply, it'll show me all the water wells within that buffer. So there were 34, and I can then go ahead and export a CSV of those water wells if I need to. And this is just water wells. I can also do COGCC wells or survey data or your own client assets if you need to. One of the other tools I want to show you real quick is the project summary. If we zoom back out, this is a high-level overview of all your projects. So you can see quickly what projects are in dispatch, what projects are complete, and so on. You can click on them and get more information about them, as well as permit type. You can see which ones are in state permitting or federal. So these are just some of the tools that the Ascent Data Manager has. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them at the end of the webinar. Keith, back to you.
And so essentially, if I just recap real quick, Phil, so, in a lot of situations, a lot of operators are, using Google Earth, basically creating a rectangle, polygon, something on Google Earth and saying, okay, let's go survey this area and see if this is where we want to put this pad. Our survey crews go out, they take a look at the area, they come back with kind of do some preliminary survey work, come back, and then that operator will review it, and then ultimately something changes, right? So maybe, like you said, there's a pipeline scar that's there, maybe there is a water feature that's there, maybe here in Colorado, there's a new housing development going in. Or maybe the geologist says we need to move this. So there could be a million different reasons, but essentially then we go back out, that's that revisit that we talked about, and we continue to survey it, bring it back, operator reviews it again, we go back out, resurvey it again in a new area, and that kind of back and forth happens, and obviously that every time that happens, there's a short delay in ultimately getting to a place where they know it's going to go and ultimately getting their permits. And so essentially, the workflow here is we could go fly it with a UAV. We understand exactly what's on the ground. We're using our tool here, and then us as a survey company, as well as maybe the environmental company, and ultimately the operators pulling up what we're looking at here, and then saying, all right, let's see, now that we have up-to-date aerial imagery, where should the pad, or where can this pad go? Because now we know it's on the ground, we've got our buffers, we've got our topography or our contours, so we know what the grade looks like in certain areas, and we've also got our kind of buffers and setbacks in there, and cultural features, right? So we have all the data, and then we just basically say, where should this pad go? Does that kind of sum it up?
Exactly, yeah. And if ever they need to change the location, all of that data already exists. We've already surveyed every piece of that field. So if they need to move it, change how it looks, they don't need to go back to the field.
Got it. Okay. Great. Anything else that we should take a look at in the live demo here, Phil?
I think that about covers it.
Okay, great. Well, if we could, we'll just switch back over real quickly to the slides. And just to quickly recap here, you know, when you think about what we're talking about, the kind of, again, the main benefits here is just looking at understanding the full picture. I know we've talked about it a bunch of times, but, you know, obviously that's a huge item here, and having multiple people get on the same page, right? We're all looking at the same up-to-date data, and getting external and internal folks on the same page obviously can provide huge efficiencies. And what do those efficiencies ultimately lead to? Well, better asset management for sure, but ultimately here in Colorado, a big deal is faster permits, and that's obviously something that we're helping to do. I would also say, you know, for folks that are on this call that are calling in from Texas, obviously there's other huge advantages too. You know, the amount of infrastructure and the amount of oil and gas infrastructure that's being put down in Texas right now is incredible with the boom that's happening. And so being able to plan around new pipeline scars or above ground gathering lines or things like that is a huge deal. And ultimately looking at this from a more comprehensive standpoint can provide some huge efficiencies. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pull up our list of questions that we may have here. So I know we've had a few that have been coming in. I don't know if we'll have time to get to all these, but well, let's just go ahead and dive into a couple that we have. So the first question I have here is this customizable? So I'll answer that in a short fashion, yes, and then I'll let Magdalena here kind of expand on that.
Of course. Thanks, Keith. So absolutely, that is the power of this tool, that it is really designed to be pretty responsive to each client's needs. So Phil has gone through a really good workflow for an upstream operator, but you know, maybe when you're placing a facility or well pad, but that is the greatest benefit. We can customize those widgets, work on workflows, reporting that makes sense to each client and their particular needs.
Okay, great. Next question here, is this only for the oil and gas industry? So my short answer again is no, it's not. We actually have some other projects that we're working on in the civil space, but I'll let Magdalena again kind of expand on that.
Yeah, so I think the concept of bringing multiple pieces of information into spatial context can really apply to any number of projects or industries. We have designed these sites for transportation, civil infrastructure. We had a wind farm inventory. It's any number of projects or industries can really utilize the same tool. We would obviously pull in a little bit more different data in it and just make it work for what the intended workflow is.
Okay, great. Next question here, is this only for Colorado? So I'm glad that question got asked, because obviously we mentioned Colorado quite a bit, and obviously in the upstream sector, there's a lot of considerations such as topography, which really comes into play, the types of setbacks and regulatory items that are in place that the operators have to abide by. So we did mention Colorado quite a bit, and apologize if we were giving the impression this is only for Colorado, because it's not, right? This is for, it could be for really any area, but maybe Magdalena, if you want to kind of expand on that.
Yeah, so one of the benefits of this tool is bringing that public data context to the client's surveyed assets. And so we try to maintain our supporting data on a state basis. So we just pick whatever, and it doesn't have to be just one state. We have clients that have operations in DJ Basin and Permian Basin. So we would just preload all the data, all the tools for both Texas and Colorado, or any number of states that you want. There's also specialized data layers that the clients might require, and we are just very flexible in adding any piece of information that might help their decision making.
Okay, great. So we could do this for Texas and do this for other states, and that would be just fine.
Yeah, we have been.
Yeah, okay, great. Can we add data? So I won't give just a short yes or no to this one, because obviously I'm not sure what type of data they're referring to in the question, but I would say generally speaking, the answer would be yes. Is that correct, Magdalena? Did you want to expand on that?
Yes, so that is a very common workflow that we gather information that we think are relevant, and then we received a lot of third-party data from a client or from their subcontractors. So we can do that on a permanent basis and just build it into the Ascent Data Manager. There's also another way to share the data. So for some of the bigger clients that already have their own GIS department, they might have their spatial data published as web mapping services, and we can bring those in on demand into the Ascent Data Manager and vice versa. So when we publish our data, they can pull it into their internal systems and vice versa.
Okay, great. I think we just have time for one last question here. The question is, how does the cost structure work? Is this a license model pricing? So the short answer is no, it's not a license model type of pricing. So meaning that you're not charged per license. And this is an important probably note to mention, because I'm sure a lot of folks have a question about this. When we set this up with our clients, they can have as many users as they'd like. They can have 2 users, or they could have 200. These could be internal, or they could be external folks inside the company or outside the company. So and you're not going to pay per license. So that's a really important, I'm actually kind of glad that question came up. How does the cost structure work? You know, typically, in some cases, these are wrapped into kind of an overall pricing structure where it's going to be more of just one project that we're going to have this be a very important component to, and so that's kind of wrapped in. Other times it could be customizable if the operator is looking for us to customize certain aspects, and that obviously gets into more of a specialized type of scoping around what they're looking to do. But hopefully that answers the question about kind of the license pricing model. No, it's not set up like that. Anything you want to add to that, Magdalena?
Yeah, I think it's very affordable is what I would like to add. This is not, tens of thousands of dollars type of investment.
Right.
With some really basic and quick tools like we showed, you can make a really helpful site for anyone in, a matter of a couple of weeks on a really reasonable budget.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm sure there's a couple people on here that are looking at it going, hey, that's awesome. Definitely would solve some problems for us, but are we talking $50,000, $100,000, for this? Because in that case, maybe tough. But yeah, no, extremely affordable, and obviously a quick turnaround on being able to get it set up. Well, I want to thank my guests here, Magdalena and Phil. Thank you guys for joining for this webinar. I hope this was helpful for all the folks that are online here. If you have any questions, please join us, or please go to ascentgeomatics.com, or you can email me. It's Keith, is my name, Keith Hulen, and my email is khulen, HULEN, @ascentgeomatics.com, and we'd be happy to answer any other questions that you may have. So thanks again, Magdalena. Thank you. Phil, thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
My pleasure.
And more to come on this, and thanks again for everybody joining. This now concludes the webinar.